How close did we come to losing the entire constitutional republic of the United States of America?
About 1 inch of a bullet's flight. About 1 inch, and even on election day, they had their method. They thought they had it wired on election day. And
of 24?
Of 24, November 5th, 2024. They thought they had it wired. We only got to the election because they thought they had it wired. And then
because see, my guess was there's no way they are going to allow an election if they know, because they know they're going to lose. So they'll have some terrorist activity or some false flag thing they'll do, shoot a bunch of school kids or whatever, so they can control the news for a month. But I thought, well, by then somebody would have to take the National Guard would have to step in to quell, more burning of blue cities. So they would never allow an election that they knew they would lose.
Right.
So I was shocked because I'm like, oh, they got something up their sleeve because they're going to allow an election.
They did, and they got the rug pulled out from under them. We've spent several years now getting to the bottom of this, and we know just how it works. There are 15 cheating techniques. 14 of them are the on-the-ground ways you know about. And they're very sophisticated people. And they study each county, and they say, based on its laws and practices, we're going to choose method B, E, and K. But so they cheat as much as they can in these different on-the-ground ways you've been hearing about for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But then on election night at 7:01 p.m. when the polls close in whatever precinct or whatever county, they're coming on from Serbia, and there's an office from Serbia that comes into a back door on these machines. Do you mind if I take a moment to explain how they work?
Please do. We've been talking about this for years. I want to hear it.
I won't geek out too much on that. But they create your computer. You might remember it has a hard drive and it has RAM, and RAM is it's random access memory, and it just means it's not recording it on a physical medium other than. And anyway, they create in that RAM what's called a virtual machine, a ghost machine in the machine. I think we agreed. We discussed a ghost.
I thought it was just a ghost in the machine, but you said no, it was
It's a ghost machine in the machine.
Uh-huh.
So it's like a second machine that's in that machine called a virtual machine. It's a technology that's been around a couple of decades. And from that ghost machine from Serbia, they access the hard drive, change everything they want, including the images, and then it disappears, and there's almost no record whatsoever. It was there, and they close the connection. That's why they have fought so hard against people getting to inspect the hard drives, because you can find it if you know what you're looking for, and you can find the connectivity that they were connected to from Canada or something. So we know just how they did it and what happened on Election Day, November 5th, 2020. And I can tell you that Kamala Harris was completely confident of winning. She was in a business.
You mean 24?
2024. I'm sorry, did I say 2020?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
She was in a business, a bank. I'll go ahead and say it now.
Mm-hmm.
A bank with her transition team, talking about opening up banking accounts for the transition. She was in the bank and talking to some people, and it was very inappropriate. I got word of it within hours. I got word of it that, first of all, her transition team were all Obama retreads.
Uh-huh.
Second, it was a whole Obama.
She's just his puppet.
Yeah, and Susan Rice's puppet.
Okay, yeah.
And so Obama retreads, and secondly, they were 100% confident. It was described to me as, Patrick, it's very inappropriate. They're smirking. They're sitting here telling us, don't believe anything you read in the press, don't believe the polls, this election's in the bag. We were 100% confident and smirking about it. So they thought they were going to win, which is why on election night, she didn't have a concession speech. She had no...
I remember that.
Remember?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote it. It was actually the only speech she gave that she sounded like a
Yeah, but it took like 12 hours to
24.
late. Yeah.
It took her 24 hours to do it.
Yeah.
And that's why they've been
Hillary didn't have one either in 16.
Right. They've been off script. They've been off script since November 6th. They did not have any script for this. They had no expectation of it. They thought it was completely in the bag. So the question is, what happened?
Yeah, what did happen?
What happened is that Serbian office, which incidentally is staffed by military intelligence from Serbia and China. Serbia is a Western satellite of China.
Yeah.
It's staffed by military intelligence. They're at the end of the day, they can jam any result they want to jam. It got neutralized. And the story of how it got neutralized is something that's going to come out in time. when the proper authorities wanted to, but they got neutralized for that day. Is what happened.
Just before the election? I mean, just before they could change the votes, it got neutralized?
24 hours before.
Can you tell me what neutralize means? I don't want to get in trouble.
I don't want to get into. I don't want to get into it here. The story will be for other people to break. But there are some real heroes, American heroes, who did their job and they neutralized that operation. And that was the final resort for the cheaters was that. So that's why they didn't have to push too hard in the U.S. because they always expected to come through at the end from Serbia. And get this, it turns out they've been doing this for 20 years and to 72 nations. China, and there's a military institute in China, in Xi'an, China, and they study every democracy, in the Western nation. And I'm sure they've got an expert for every one of 3,000 counties in America. And I'm sure that county, what county are we in here?
This is Blanco County.
Blanco County? Yeah. I'm sure that that there's some expert who knows more about Blanco County than anyone you know.
On the Chinese payroll.
Well, there's a Blue Masonic Lodge in town, so that says everything.
Well, and they have been for 20 years altering who wins in the school board level, the police, the captains, every elected position and moving up. And then they've just in the last 5 years got to the top. But that's so Chinese to take over, to overthrow the West like that without firing a shot.
Yeah, without firing a shot and without seemingly arousing any suspicion at all.
The nature of fifth generation warfare is you don't even know that you're under attack or who your enemy is. But it's so Chinese. For 2,500 years, they have believed that the greatest victory is to win without fighting. Mm-hmm. And that's what they've done. The goal was to overthrow our republic. They've been at it 20 years, but all across the West. So we bemoan what we see happening in Europe and this migration. Well, it just turns out that the politicians who are doing this are not truly getting elected by the people. They're getting chosen from some people in Serbia, some Chinese military intelligence. So they've studied the West down to every nook and cranny, and they are bending the arc of the West so that it crashes into a brick wall. And this is all, it's not a theory anymore. And there's people who really need to understand this, understand it all now. And President Trump understands it in these terms, that this is, I believe that he understands it in these terms, that it's, I don't speak for him.
My uncle understood it when I was 5 years old. My Uncle Larry was a lifer in the Army, Sergeant Barr. I used to imitate him when I wanted to be a sergeant like that. I used to tell my sister, pick up my socks, Major. I didn't know how it went, but I thought I could boss her.
That may be where your bossy personality is.
Yeah, I said they called me Bossy the Cow, because she was on our milk bottles. Bossy the Cow says, good. Anyway, now I forgot what I was even talking about. My Uncle Larry, he told us when I was 5. He goes, hey, if the Jews are lucky, they might be able to get jobs as gardeners for the Chinese by the time you grow up. That was pretty prescient.
Yeah. Well.
That was even before Kissinger. Or maybe just around Kissinger. What do you think 71. Of him? He's a no good
Bad guy. He's part of, Kissinger, he the old saying is, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And that's nowhere, of no one is that more true than it was true of Henry Kissinger. I saw some of that up close at one point in my life and how he operated.
Can I ask you a question? So China, in your estimation, and you say you have facts to back it up, and I believe you, they're behind all the shit that's been driving us crazy in the West the last 30 years, because there's theories about Satanists and Jews and Muslim Brotherhood, and I'm sure everyone's somewhat involved, but China seems to be the driving force when I talk to you.
Yeah, China is the chairman of the board. The operators are Cuba and Venezuela. They're the front line.
Okay.
You want to know the org structure?
Yes, please.
Okay,
I like the org structure.
The org. Yeah, the org and the organization structure is the vice presidents of the effort are the 4 Mexican cartels, the Sinaloan, the Jalisco Nueva Generation, the Gulf, and the Zetas. Those are just the vice presidents. The president is the Venezuela cartel. And the Venezuela cartel is also known as the government of Venezuela. Venezuela is where mafia took over the government. So that's the president to their vice presidents. Cuba and Iran are also very major players, and Iran's been the paymaster, and there's been a transfer pricing mechanism out of Iran, so we couldn't even see payments among these parties. That's the stack that we're up against. Think of it as ultimately Cuba, Venezuela, Chinese at the top. Chinese is in the background, and they're the master strategists, and they make the final calls, and they have an office in Xi'an, China, and they study every county, and they've been shaping who wins elections, and they can't change things 20%, but they can change them 5, 10%, 15% in a bench. And just how brilliant that is, the strategy of, the greatest victory is to win without fighting, without having to fire a shot. They've almost collapsed the West, and we weren't supposed to get through this last 4 years.
Don't you love that saying? I think it's Gad Saad that said it. Suicidal empathy.
Yeah.
Don't you love that?
Great. Exactly.
That they really took advantage of us and our good nature and hospitality, which is exactly what Hitler did with the German people.
I was a student in China in 83, 84 for a year. And it was considered a hardship post if you were like a Marine stationed at the embassy. It was so poor, it was like Albania. It was a few $100s per year income. And 83, 84 is when American corporations started showing up, and I saw that. And they were being kept waiting, and you became a junior partner to Chinese people everywhere but they allowed capitalism in, and America transferred. There were people of my generation and where I got educated that the kids who stayed on with that and went to work for like the World Bank, helping China. I mean, it was part of the American spirit that we loved China, that we looked at for China, that we helped. We kept the Europeans from carving China up like they did Africa. The plan was, and that was, we called it the open door policy. And the first time the U.S. flexed its muscle on the global stage was to defend China to get beginning whacked up. And we helped them from the 80s and the 90s. We transferred all this knowledge and everything, and it turns out their plan all along has been to subvert us and overthrow us. So this has been, a 20-year plan in the making.
Could your health issues be caused by an invisible enemy? Fatigue, bloating, brain fog? What if parasites are the real culprit? I was digging into parasite cleanses when I came across this video from this trusted doctor.
What are the main differences between ivermectin and fenbendazole? These are two anti-pathogens used to treat parasitic infections and other similar types of conditions. They are used quite often in the oncology world to treat cancer. They both have as anti-pathogenic abilities.
Did you know that 50% of Americans have parasites? They're everywhere in our food, water, and our pets. They secretly invade your body, wreaking havoc on your gut, energy levels, and even your brain. And the mainstream medical system, they don't want you thinking about this because one great cleanse can change your life. The Wellness Company has a solution for your ivermectin plus mebendazole, plus FDA approved to treat parasites, now combined in a parasite cleanse combo that wipes out many of these invaders. Just fill out a brief medical intake to get your 3-month supply. Lots of parasite cleanses are all over social media, but not the gold standard level. Maha is officially here, and the Wellness Company is making these hard-to-get medications digitally accessible so you can live your best life. Head to twc.health/RB and use the code RB to save $60 off plus free shipping. Don't wait. Cleanse your body and take back control today.
And it starts with the Venezuelan mafia. When they took control of the government, they were smart enough. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves, but bigger than Saudi Arabia. So there's if you're them, there's two things you need to capture. You need to capture the oil industry, the oil company, which is called PDVSA, and then they've just used it to steal $4 trillion. I think that $4 trillion over the last generation. While their own people, there's starvation, there's cannibalism. If you own the world's best, gasoline pump, and you can just pump trillions of dollars. The other thing you need to corrupt is the election system. And that way you never can get dislodged. And that's what they did. And that election system got commercialized as a company called Smartmatic. And Smartmatic is a commercial front for the Venezuelan mafia / government. And then Smartmatic's technology ended up, and I won't get you sued with any more, but through hook or by crook and corporate divestments and bankruptcies and licensing agreements, it ended up as the core technology of all the major manufacturers. You're voting on Venezuelan mafia-controlled software. It's a crazy story.
With Chinese hardware, right?
Chinese hardware. It's made in the components come from a factory 60 miles outside of Beijing. The components are sent to Taiwan where they're assembled on an assembly line. And at the end of the assembly line, they get the right logo on them. Are they Dominion? Are they ES&S? Are they Hart? Or are they Smartmatic? But it's the same assembly line. Right. And these components are assembled. And I was told by somebody 15 years ago that the Chinese could now burn stuff down into the actual hardware of things in a way that it couldn't be found. But this, we now know exactly how they did it through this virtual machine method created in the RAM. We can demonstrate it on the machines where we've had access to. This is what, the story of Tina Peters.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Tina Peters.
That's what she did her job as the county recorder and protected the computer records of the county.
And went to prison.
And is in prison for 9 years, but she's going to get sprung. And
we hope so.
Yeah, before they're treating her like a
Gold Star mother.
Gold Star, Navy SEAL mom. And they're treating her, they're like, for any little their infraction, they're throwing her in the brig for days, in the solitaries. They're and roughing her up. So she got an image of the hard drive, and what that image showed was two things. One, then after Dominion visited, another image was taken, and the thing was completely changed and written over and covered up. They smashed down all the data. It's called a smash down. And when you looked at the original, so that's like 100,000 felonies in itself. Mm-hmm. Then when you looked at the original, what the original showed was in the middle of the election, an new illegal database, election database just sort of appeared out of nowhere. Votes were siphoned over. 20% of them were flipped. 20 or 30 of them were changed.
This was 2020.
This was 2020, yes. But it didn't, I should have been clear. This was 2020. But they couldn't find out how it was done. And they looked around, they thought there must be some hidden script, a cloaked script buried in the machine somewhere. No, it turns out it's done through this method from Serbia. And it's Chinese military intelligence sitting there bending these elections. So think how they can change as crazy as the last 20 years have seemed. That's surreal. Doesn't it seem like we're choosing suicide?
No.
Yeah, we are choosing. Well, it seems like, we voted suicidally to put these people that are just really hardcore communists who want to rob our treasury.
Yeah, they're not really winning the
office.
Elections. They're not really winning. That's the magic thing. They're not really winning. Right. And that's the genius of this. And we just see it as, boy, the world's getting strange pretty quickly. That's because these phonies are being, these elections are being rigged for them. Imagine like running a casino where every card table and roulette wheel, you get to build some edge odds in. You can completely change the economics of that casino. And that's what the left has done.
I mean, how I know they're completely arrogant, though, which is always their downfall. The Bible says that. Arrogance and ignorance are the exact same thing, two sides of the same coin. Pride. Can't have one without the other. But I knew the way they are so arrogant with their, nose in the air, talking down with a sneer on their face, right. Always on media. And just that real collegiate thing they've got for the working class.
The Thurston Howell Jr. Argument. It is beneath me. It is beneath me, sir, even to respond to such an argument. Yeah. It's beneath me, Lovey. It's like that's really where they are. They just it's beneath us to respond. Like they won't even explain the basics.
They don't think they have to because they don't want any accountability.
It's beneath them.
Accountability is beneath them. And when you ask for accountability from them, they say, we're going to attack you and put you in prison because no one's above the law. It's all bullshit.
Yeah, Thomas Sowell says that they want society to be run by people like themselves who get to make all the decisions and don't pay any of the costs of being wrong. That's their perfect world. They never want to eat their own cooking. And when I've seen them in business situations, those kinds of people in business situations, they're the worst.
Yeah.
They're the absolute worst, never accomplish anything, just a bunch of talk, but they think they know how they should redesign civilization.
Yeah, they're deal breakers, not deal makers.
Yeah.
Well, it's just all about their ego and their, penis. It's penis rule. I call it dictardia. It's like they're dictards. They can't rise above it, above the lower chakras.
Well, you've spent, low-grade mammalian existence, a friend of mine calls it.
Oh, that's exactly perfect. How far did you go and risk your life, your safety, your sanity? How far, because I know you did, but what drove you to do that, to prove that? Was it like, okay, I'm not going to let liars win, or was it, I'm right and I need to prove it? What was it?
Well, great question. How far? Let me answer the first one first. How far did I go? Venezuela now has a $25 million hit on me.
Wow.
They really have and this was communicated to me by the United States government. I was in West Africa and there was an attempt to assassinate me, to rough me up and get me. And that turned out to be organized, and the police were there. And took care and arrested people, and they said that the police let me know that there was some sort of, the mafia was basically saying, their informants were saying, there's this organized effort all over West Africa. Whoever sees you is to kidnap you, and this is being done at the request of a Nigerian warlord. And then the U.S. government got in touch to confirm these facts and said this is being done at the request of Venezuela, has had the Nigerian do this. They know you're in West Africa. So they that was a long way to say Venezuela has a $25 million bounty on they want me kidnapped. And they believe I interfered in their July 28th national election. And
by what? Trying to make it not rigged?
By making it not rigged. Well, they're not, I think they're not attuned to such philosophical subtleties. So anyway, but they rigged their election. They tried to rig their election, and something happened that disrupted their ability to rig their election. And they seem to think I know something about this.
Okay.
So we're not.
So that's just profiling.
That's just, maybe. Anyway, so I'll tell you that story next time I see you. I can tell you that story.
Can you talk about working from other countries?
Well, yes. The first 2 years after the overthrow of the republic, that was the 2020 election. Yeah. Mm-hmm. People are going to understand someday that was a act of war from some foreign nations, and it was supposed to be the end of the American Republic. And that will be understood sooner rather than later, I think. That'll be controversial. I spent the first 2 years working with Michael Flynn in the America Project, which we've talked about before. Then I've spent 2 years overseas basically trying to get to the bottom of the Venezuelan government. And we actually had I had some professional, I had some folks, cybersecurity experts, working with me trying to penetrate the Venezuelan government. And it was organized, it was being run out of multiple countries. And I was thrown out one day. The prime minister of the country I was in sent his lawyer, called me from the lobby of the hotel and came up and said, Patrick, we are become aware of what you're really doing in our country. We're not going to arrest you because we think you might be correct. But you can't do this from our soil. You've got 24 hours to leave the country. And the prime minister wants me to tell you that you are, in our analysis, you're conducting 4 or 5 major international felonies. And the government of Venezuela is going to take the position that you personally have conducted an act of war against them. I know.
That's pretty awesome.
That's amazing.
It's punk rock.
Yeah, that is punk rock.
Nice guy like me.
What the hell? So you can't ever go to Venezuela. Well, you could if you dress up like, if you put on a burqa, you could go.
Yeah.
Oh, you see.